They're two of the biggest musical artists to ever live. But did you know that they dated? The untold love story between Leonard Cohen and Joni Mitchell is now getting a stage treatment that will be at the Centennial Concert Hall this week. From the Newport Folk Festival to California, the show will feature some of the biggest songs by both artists. Those songs will be shared by Wylie and Joe Nolan, both of whom join us now on Classic 107. Hello, you two.
Hey,
Hi.
Nolan.
So, first of all, nice last name, Joe. For those who don't know, to start off with, what was the relationship between these two artists like? Maybe I'll start with you, Joe, since you have such a great last name.
Sure. I think a lot of what's not known is well, one, that they dated in their, when they were just starting out, but their love and connection sort of lasted throughout their whole careers.
Mhm.
And it truly did change. I believe it changed, their music and how they influence each other and uh, this show sort of tells that beautiful story of how not only their careers but their love was intertwined throughout 50 years.
So I want to break that down a little bit more with you, Dana. When you see all of the songs that are portrayed throughout the show, how do you see the influence maybe of one artist onto another?
Well, I mean, the influence of Leonard on Joni is there very concretely in that she wrote that. I mean, some are disputed, but at least three of her songs were definitely about him. She wrote them about him. And there's an early one of her very obscure songs, which we don't do in the show, which sounds so much like Leonard Cohen's song Suzanne that like it's just like clearly it's like a ripoff, but it's beautiful and it's like when one of the stories we do tell in the show is that she saw him perform Suzanne just before they met at the Newport Folk Festival, and that she told him afterwards that she thought it was just an amazing song. And so then she clearly went and was so inspired by that that she ended up writing the song, which is very, very Suzanne-like. So that influence is clear. I think the influence the other way around is maybe not quite as concrete, but I mean, he definitely admired her as an artist and as a writer to the point where that was became a problem in their dating because he was a bit intimidated by how she just seemed to be so inspired all the time.
Wow. So interesting to hear about that dynamic and the way in which that dynamic influences their sort of creative processes. That, of course, is just one element of this because you are portraying Leonard and Joni on the stage, but you're also your own individual musicians with your own careers to talk about. Maybe, Dana, how has the music of Joni Mitchell in particular influenced your musical journey?
Oh my gosh. So deeply. I mean, it's hard to, the influence is such a funny thing. It's like, to what extent does her work feed into mine? I don't know, because the creative process is so mysterious, but I certainly spent a lot of time, particularly through my 20s, just kind of wrapping her albums around myself and just spent with Joni Mitchell's albums, I always felt like I kind of entered them like a almost going like into a little cave or something, and you're just in that for a while and it just seeps into you. And I really, with her albums uniquely among all artists, I feel like I really, she she touched so deeply on the, that beautiful thing that songwriting can do where you get so specific about your own experience that it becomes universal. And she is the master of that. And so I'm certainly steeped in it. I don't know what to say beyond that, but heavily steeped.
Hmm. What about for you here, Joe, and the music of Leonard Cohen? How's that impacted your career as a musician?
He was kind of the first artist that when I started really diving into lyrics and poetry, he was my friend. I remember in high school, my friend burnt me this disc of a bunch of, songs from multiple albums of his. And the first time hearing Famous Blue Raincoat or a bunch of Lonesome Heroes, or I was like, I'd never heard music like that before with such rich poetry, his style is so dedicated, it seems like, compared to other lyricists and artists that I love. You could tell that he really cared about everything he was saying. And so that's how the poetry and music has always been something that I'm drawn to, and he's at the top of the list for influences for me, for sure. And that's so is Joni Mitchell. I mean, they're both just, they're untouchable, and it's so cool to dive into their music and this story and get to feel like you can really get a sense of how special it really was, and how special the music is.
You mentioned how untouchable these musicians are, and yet this show kind of puts you in the position of having to touch them in some senses. Like, you have to be able to portray these characters and to dive into the music. What's the balance when you're approaching this music, Joe, between producing something like a carbon copy versus putting your own imprimatur onto the poetry and the music?
I think it's impossible to try to, this show, it would be difficult, I think, Dana has lots of theater experience, but we don't pretend to be them. We more so just share their story and emulate their spirit, rather than I'm Leonard Cohen, during the show. And I think that allows us to really be ourselves and put our own spin on the music a little bit, and it just feels a lot more natural. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question enough.
Well, absolutely. And we can throw this also to Dana, I think, when you're talking about putting your own spin on these iconic songs by such iconic artists. What does that spin on Joni Mitchell look like for you, Dana, when you add, as Joe mentioned, your own theater experience into this production?
Well, I suppose the theater experience I bring to it is mostly in the storytelling, because like Joe said, we're not like imitating them or anything like that. But what's wonderful about Joni Mitchell and Leonard Cohen, almost uniquely, I'd say, like I would imagine that with any other tribute show, if you're paying tribute to an artist, usually like a particular song by that artist will be really defined by its album version, like a particular version of that song. And so you kind of are bound to doing something that sounds like the recorded version. But with both Joni Mitchell and Leonard Cohen, their songs live on their own, and they both did multiple versions of all their songs that are well known, and also were so heavily covered by other people who have their own versions. Like Hallelujah is obviously a good example of that. The Jeff Buckley version, the Katie Lang version, people know those as well as Leonard's multiple versions. So the songs exist on their own, which really opens us up. It frees us to be able to just, what we want to do is embody the songs and pay homage to the heart of the songs, rather than kind of try to do a carbon copy of a particular recording or something like that.
So that's shedding some new light onto these songs, and it'll put some different context on them for audiences. And I'm sure probably putting some new context onto these songs for you as well. Maybe you can talk a bit, Dana, about what new light has been shed on these artists for you as you've been preparing this show, things that maybe you didn't know before that puts these songs into a fresh perspective.
And it's a little bit tricky because, at least with Joni, it's like I'd read all the biographies and autobiographies and heard all the interviews. There aren't, I don't know if there are any of the stories that we tell that I didn't know already, but so it's to be able to share them, that's a joy. And I mean, one thing I don't think I knew, or I had forgotten if I did know, is that one of Joni's most famous songs, A Case of You from Blue, she wrote that about Leonard, and I don't think I knew that. And I've been covering that song since my 20s, for like 20 years. So it's a very special and important song to me. So that was pretty cool to discover.
Wow. Yeah, that bond on such an iconic Joni Mitchell track off of arguably her most famous record. Joe, what new elements of Leonard Cohen and Joni Mitchell, as you two are shedding new light and new perspective onto these songs, what new elements will you think the audience take away from this production?
Well, I think the coolest thing about this show is how it connects both of these artists together, whereas I think they're often perceived as just, individual artists and two universal icons. But the story really focuses on how intertwined their lives and their art were for their whole careers, from an early meeting at Newport Folk Festival. And a lot of the stories, unlike Dana, like I knew of some of them, but a lot of it was new to me, which just makes the work so much richer and the song so much richer. And like, for example, A Case of You, it is one of the greatest love songs of all time and one of the most heartbreaking songs of all time. So it just goes to show how much influence they had on each other, and that really changed. I mean, it really had an impact on their art, which, if they didn't meet, I don't know if that song would have been written, it wouldn't have been. Sure. So.
Wow. It'll be so interesting to see all of these songs coming back around for audiences, new and old, at this incredible production that's happening on September the 23rd, 7:30 p.m. at the Centennial Concert Hall. We'll have more information at our website, classic107.com, and on the Classic 107 app. Joe Nolan and Dana Wylie, this has been such a joy to get to know this show and these two artists a little bit more through you today, and all the best as you perform.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nolan.